So for the month of June, I read a bunch of books. So we're gonna get into it right now. The first one I read was Nothing But the Bane by Naomi Salmon. And this was just a tiny little novella. And it's about this story about this town that is experiencing amnesia rain. Like if you go out into the water when it's raining, you forget stuff. Like even if it's just a little bit of rain that falls on you, they have to suit up. And even if you do go out, like if it gets misty, you're still getting a little of that. So you're forgetting things. So you have to like write notes on yourself and put like a thing around your neck, like what you were doing, so you don't forget what you were doing. And some people, it can completely erase their whole persona. It was a pretty wild concept. And so they have them in this town, and there's all these military that won't let these people leave. And so eventually they decide, or some of the people decide, they're going to try to leave. You know, they don't have any weapons and the military is out there with their guns, but they have a plan to like try and escape. It's a story about that. It's a novella. It was weird and it was short and it was sweet, and I thought it was quite fantastic. The next thing I read was Tombs by Junji Ito, and I've been getting more into manga, dipping a toe in the water. I know this is not a toe, it's a finger, but you know, we'll represent toe. I know you don't want me to like grab my foot and put it up here. That'd be weird. See, I looked down, I thought about it for a second, I'm like, no. No. So Tombs had a bunch of different short stories in it. One of my favorites, I think, was the namesake of it, Tombs. It was just this weird story about this town, like wherever the people would die in the town, wherever they put them or wherever they fell over, that's where their tomb would go. Bunch of tombs in the middle of the road and just like all over the place in weird spots. So when people are in a hospital and they're gonna die, they gotta carry them out of there super quick so that there's not a bunch of tombstones inside the hospital and stuff like that. It was really weird and it was pretty great. And then there's just a bunch of like weird, wacky stories in there. And that was my first experience of Junji Ito, and I thought it was pretty awesome. So I'm excited to get into more of their stuff. Probably next month we'll talk about some more. My plan with manga is to read at least one or two a month. So then after that, I read The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Clare. That book is about a mermaid and a plague doctor that go on this journey together after this kingdom has been destroyed by the mermaid's daughters. So the backstory on her was she was captured by this king and made his bride, and he killed like her whole family and whatnot, and he pulled out her teeth, and he's like, but I saved you. Cool guy. So anyways, she ends up getting pregnant. The daughters are gestating. She's part mermaid and he is human, and she ends up having hundreds of daughters, and they eat everything and destroy the kingdom. So current day, her and this plague doctor, who had always treated her rather nicely, one of the few, they decide they're gonna take off and go and see what else is out in the world. It doesn't really say they have a like specific destination, but they start going, and then they encounter in the woods this strange village of bloodthirsty children and these three weird priests that oversee them. And it's a very strange story, and it's poetic and lyrical, and it's grotesque and eloquent at the same time. It was like really good. I liked it a lot. So after that, I read Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. This book comes out in August, and it's awesome. If you've read Catriona Ward, she's the twistiest of twistiest authors, and this book had more twists in it as well. It was fantastic. It's my new favorite of hers. It follows the story of this kid, Wilder Harlow. He's kind of nerdy and doesn't really have any friends, and his family ends up inheriting this cottage from his uncle. They go to Whistler's Bay, which is where it is, and he makes these friends, Harper and Nathaniel. It follows the summers of their friendship and the weird stuff that happens, and then also at the same time there's a serial killer that's loose in the area, and like women have disappeared over the years, and there's this, they call him the Dagger Man of Whistler Bay, and he goes and leaves these Polaroids in people's houses in their children's rooms with him with his like dagger up to these kids' necks. And the kids never end up dead, but there's been women that are disappearing. So it's this whole thing of like what happened. And later on, Wilder goes away to college and meets this person, Sky, and they become really close. Wilder tells the story of what happened to Sky, and Sky writes a book about it and publishes it, and that kind of like ruins their friendship because Wilder's like, what the F? You stole this from me. And so at some point, Wilder decides he's gonna go back to the cottage and he's gonna write a book and set the record straight. But then he starts finding these like notes around the cottage in Sky's signature green handwriting, and it starts thinking he's going crazy and starts seeing weird stuff. And It's so good. If you like Catriona Ward, if you like twisty horror, it's absolutely fantastic. Comes out in August. Definitely check it out. And then next, I read a super weird book. It was so weird. It's Venus Underground. And I've been calling it Venus Underground, but it might be Venice Underground. And I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna stay with Venus, but it might be Venice. It's spelled, as you can see, Veniss, so that could be Venus or Venice. Pronounce it however you like. I don't know. It's freaking weird. It follows these three characters. There's also this guy, Quinn, who creates things that shouldn't exist. Bioengineers these creatures that are grotesque and fantastical and just strange. The main character gets involved with Quinn and goes down this seedy, messed up road and kind of like starts doing all these terrible things and kind of disappears into the underground, because there's an underground and there's an above ground. And then his sister, the twin sister, like decides to go looking for the brother, and she goes and talks to her ex-lover, Shadrach, and is like, hey, my brother disappeared. Do you know anything? Da 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 da. And so Shadrach decides he's gonna go and try to find the brother, and just goes through all this crap to try and find him, and terrible things ensue in the story, and it was weird and strange. And after you read like the main story, there's more short stories about other stuff that happened in this Venus Underground place, and it was pretty cool. It was super weird. After that, I read Mosaic by Catherine McCarthy, and this book also comes out in August. She gets this job. She is a stained glass window repairer. I forget what the heck it's called. A glazier? It's called like a glazier or glazier. So she gets this job at this really old church. It's called St. Sannon's. There's some of the glass from the old window, like it was destroyed, and the window seems like it was blown outward, which is weird because you would think if a window was destroyed, it would be hit inward from weather, but like it's blown outward and the glass is all like in this little graveyard that's out front of it. And as she starts to like piece together the glass to try to figure out like what the image is, it turns out to be a really weird freaking image. And then she's trying to find out from in town and the library like any information that she possibly can about the St. Sannons, and no one wants to help her, and they're super unhelpful. The librarian's a jerk. She finds like one thing that has a little bit of info, but she didn't have a library card, so she's like, hey, can you hold this for me, and da 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 da. And then like when she comes back the next time, the library pretends it doesn't exist or whatever, and so no one will tell her anything. So she's having a hard time finding out anything about this. She can't find anything in history about the St. Sannon. And then as she's starting to piece together what this might possibly look like, they find this crypt in the church, and what's down there? Just creepy weird stuff starts happening, and the main guy who wants her to refinish this window is got kind of weird vibes going on, and it's creepy and atmospheric, and it was pretty good. I really liked it. So I read another manga, and that was El Nijigahara Holograph by Inio Asano, and that was recommended to me by Super Blomper, because I don't really know where to go with manga, so I'm open to suggestions. If you have any, like, let me know down below in the comments. And this one was really weird, and it was definitely very Lynchian. It's a story of this town, and there's this weird tunnel where people say there's monsters down there, and women have been found dead in that area, and it's about like what happened and these different kids. There's like this weird teacher who has these bandages on her face, and then there's this other kid who's this very violent and kind of a bully, and then there's this other guy who's kind of suicidal, and just all these like weird trippy things happen. And there's like this thing with all these like butterflies that keep appearing all over the place, and it's very liminal and interdimensional. I'm not describing this well at all because it's really freaking hard to even wrap my brain around how to describe it, but I like the weirdness of it. It was really strange. It's one of those ones that you read it and you're like, okay, I need to read this again to get a better like grasp on it. The next book I read was a non-fiction. It was called Welllived Life, a 102-year-old doctor's 6 secrets to health and happiness at any age by Dr. Gladys McGarry. I always kind of like books about health and wellness. She is 102 years old and she's still alive, and it just goes over like a lot of having a different outlook at things and positivity, ways that you can uplift yourself, have a healthier way of thinking and living and all of that stuff. I thought it was pretty good. The only thing I thought that maybe it could have had more in, because when you talk about health and wellness, you have to include a little bit about diet, and there was absolutely nothing about like diet in there, and I thought there should have been just at least a little bit. If you eat McDonald's every day, you're not going to be healthy. maybe you'll be happy, but you're not gonna be healthy. And she didn't talk anything about diet. There was a lot of like nice little things that you could apply to your life that I thought was pretty good, and with those kinds of books and whatnot. And I enjoyed the reading experience, but I thought there could have been some more stuff in there that was a little more direct. A lot of it was about the mental and spiritual health, and that is very important too. That was definitely something that was interesting to me and I found quite lovely to read about. The next book was Lone Women by Victor Laval. I love this book. It was so good. I had no idea I'd love it so much. It's a Western. It takes place in the early 1900s. It's about Adelaide Henry, and she's got this big steamer trunk. When it's open, people disappear and bad things happen, and bad stuff happened in California, so she had to get the heck out of Dodge, and she's going to Montana, where right now the US, they're giving women and people of different races that can tame the land. After 3 years, that land is theirs. And in Montana, like, you can see for miles and miles and miles, and it's kind of brutal living there, and it's super windy and it's cold, and you really gotta rely on your neighbors. And closest neighbor to her is like 9 miles away, and she's living by herself all out in this little shack. And you know, people pass through, strange men or cowboys, and so you really gotta like rely on your found family and just some of the delusions of the town folks and like the crap that happens. And then coming back to the steamer trunk, like, what is in there? What is Adelaide's secret? Seriously, what is it? It's gory, it's emotional, it's a really beautiful story, and I liked it quite a bit. And then I read my first Shirley Jackson book, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I've been meaning to read a Shirley Jackson book for a really long time, and I finally did. And I absolutely love this book. It was really good. It was really atmospheric and creepy. And a lot of times, you know, you read books that are kind of classic, and sometimes you're just bored to tears. I mean, this was written, I think, in the 60s or 70s. It did not bore me to tears. I read it really quickly. It was a great read. It was well written. The characters were well fleshed out. Just a very enjoyable read, and I definitely want to check out some more of Shirley Jackson's books in the future. Okay, so the next book that I read, this was for a book club read. It was called The Dogs of Summer by Andrea Abreu Lopez. So it was a translated work of fiction, but this book had so much mention of poop, turds, and vomit. It totally overshadowed the story and made it unenjoyable to read. It was like every other page was like turds and poop and barf. Literally the main character, you never know their name because this other girl, Sora, just refers to her as shit. I don't know. I didn't think it was good. It could have been, the story would have been fine without all the poop and turds and vomit. Not a winner for me. No, that book was turds. Literally. The next book I read, I loved. It's called Gone to the Wolves by John Ray. Yes. I picked this book up purely for the cover because I like the font, the metal, and it's like, you know, black and silver, and it has almost like a rainbow kind of sheen to it when it hits the light right. It follows these three characters, Kip, Kira, and Leslie, and their friendship throughout high school and how they bond over metal music. And then it takes you from Florida to LA to Berlin to Norway. What happens along the way, you know, relationships with other people, drug problems, the metal scene. Kira ends up getting taken, and so then the two other characters, Kip and Leslie, they have to go find her and try to bring her back, but like, is she already dead? Are they gonna be able to save her? Who freaking knows? It took me a little bit to get into the story though. I will say that I did not really get into it fully until they were in California. But you need the Florida part because you need to build up their friendship and like give them that bond. So for me, that part was felt a little slow, but once I got into LA and beyond, I was running with the wolves, man. It was so good. I freaking loved it. I loved it too because I've always loved rock and metal, and I've had that background, and one of the characters ends up being a music journalist. I was also a music journalist and covered mainly rock and metal, so that also like appealed to my heart. And then I read Spin a Black Yarn by Josh Malerman. This book comes out in August, and it is 5 novellas in one. It just has a lot of really fantastic stories. My favorite story, which has a title that I don't think is exciting at all, it's literally called Doug and Judy by the House Washer. I loved that story in there so much. Doug and Judy are buttholes. Everybody hates them. They're jerks. And they're really freaking rich. And they buy this full house washer. What happens is sad and beautiful, and you get this glimpse of hints of what their life was before, and that maybe, just maybe, they weren't always a-holes. It was really freaking good. Out of the 5 stories, I absolutely loved 3 of them. And then the other 2, I thought one was good, and then the other one was pretty darn good. You can't freaking fully love them all, let's just be honest. But 3 of them, awesome. So if you are a fan of videos where I talk about multiple books that I've read, next video coming up be another video about that. So stick around, check it out. And if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.